Alright guys, welcome back to the video. So today we're going to start by getting the headboard glued up, and I feel like this is going to be the death of me. Because moving this thing around yesterday was a nightmare, but after today we're going to be having to move this headboard around everywhere it needs to go as one giant solid object. So what this means is I'm going to have to be very careful with what I'm doing and not drop this headboard on myself or on the floor preferably, because it's going to cause some damage to itself if it falls off the workbench. So we're going to start by doing a dry assembly, getting all of our holes drilled, then from there we'll move into doing the actual glue up. Okay, so we got the headboard glued up here. I'm not going to move it for like half an hour. I just want to give the glue a little bit of time to set up while it's under all this nice clamping pressure. Because when I do move this thing, I want to take the clamps off and I want to make sure I have as little excess weight on here as absolutely possible, because I would guess that the headboard here is probably around 100 pounds, maybe even a little bit more. There's a lot of wood in here and it is very, very heavy. So now all that's left to do on the headboard is we have to add our edge profile to the very top edge, that nice round over profile we're doing on everything else. Go back in, clean up all of our dowels here, do a little bit of finish sanding. Then the final thing will be going in and shimming out the back side of all of our floating panels here so they're sitting nice and flush. One thing, I don't know if I mentioned this throughout the whole project, which is a pretty important thing to mention, is that because these panels are so wide and the grain is going horizontally across them, there's going to be a lot of wood movement to them. I checked on the Jonathan Katz-Moses wood movement calculator. That's a long term, but I highly recommend keep bookmarking that page because it can save you a lot of stress. So when I checked on that page, it says that the maximum wood movement these panels are going to see over their time is just under 1/4 of an inch. Which is great because that is about how much room I plan for in this space here. Because I'm assembling this in the summer when we have the most humidity in that here, this is when the panels are going to be at their most expanded. So I didn't want to leave a full 1/4 inch in there because if I took it off so that there was a full 1/4 inch of expansion in there, what could happen in the winters, these panels could shrink back down as they will likely do, and then you could get gaps on that top edge. So I want to avoid that as much as possible. So once I get the headboard off of the workbench, I'm going to pull these side rails over and get them cleaned up first. Then we'll go over to the footboard, get that cleaned up last. And then we'll have to assemble all that to do kind of the final edge profiles, which we'll talk about before we actually do that. Okay, so before I get too far along and I forget, I want to make the little caps that are going to go over our bed bolts here. So I got a comment on the last project, and for the life of me, I cannot find it again. I can't remember who left it, but it was a really good idea. So the idea was to put a normal magnet on the bottom of the cap here, so that when you put it in, it just sticks right to the bolt. Then to take the cap off, you'd grab a stronger magnet, so it could make a little thing that you'd hide somewhere under the bed, and then you just use that to pull that cap off, and it'd be pretty easy. Now that's a really great idea, but there's two kind of issues with it that I'm realizing right now. I was fully planning to use that technique on these two caps here because I really love that idea. But as I'm kind of sitting here trying to figure it out, first off is that the top of the bolts isn't actually flat. It has these stamped numbers and letters and that on it, and there's not really a good place for this magnet to sit nice and flat. So that means that every time you put that cap on, that magnet might be sitting in a different location, making it so that it's not sitting nice and flat with our surface here. The other issue is that just the way that these bed bolts work, and I think this is very specific to these bed bolts and with the barrel nuts and that, is that every single time you put them in, they might be at a slightly different angle. But that means that if our cap is referencing against the top of the bolt here, it's not always going to sit nice and flush here. Okay, so quick proof of concept here. So I turned this plug, it's a pretty good fit. I went over and hand planed it so that everything fit up pretty good. And you can see here that as I turn the bolt, you can see that just slightly the edges are gonna pop up just like that right there. And that's just due to those letters and numbers and that are stamped on the head of the bolt. You can see that there's not really any good way to make it stay flat. Same thing, you can see if the bolt is not in the perfect position to when I hand planed it, you can see how we get a little bit of weirdities here. So there's no guarantee with that. So that's the only reason why I don't like the idea of this interacting with this whatsoever. So I think I'm gonna go with the same way I did it, or at least try to do it the same way I did it on the walnut bed, where we're just gonna turn this exact same plug, make it a nice tight friction fit in that hole, and then we'll just drill a little 1/8 hole in there. And I'll make sure it's a little bit thinner than this. We're going to go with like a 1/4 inch so that there might be enough room between the head of the bolt and the bottom of the cap here in order to get something in there to pry it out. Well, that is another king-size bed set up in the middle of the shop. I had to move the workbench out of the way because obviously there just was not enough room to set this thing up. And I decided to fully set it up, including the headboard. The glue on that has sat for long enough I'm not really worried about moving around in that, so it's fine. It's in place, and we'll leave it here because a lot of our stuff is now going to interact with each other. We have to bring our roundover along the footboard here. That's all going to interact with each other because our side rails and our footboard are at the same level. So we got to make sure that we clean all that up before we add in our roundover. That's going to somehow match through there. Still don't quite know what I'm going to do with that whole, round over through a corner, but we'll see, how it goes there. Then on the headboard, obviously we still have to do all of our cleanup, cut off our dowels, add the round over to this top edge here, but all of that can be done while it's standing up here. It should be pretty easy to do. So we're going to handle all of this tomorrow. Again, by the end of tomorrow, my hope is to have the first coat of finish on this thing. So that means we have to get all of our edge profiles done, all of our finish sanding done on the headboard here, our finished profiles up there, and then touch up any areas that I may have marked up while I was setting this thing up. So the idea here is that now that this is assembled, we can leave it here and I don't want to touch it again until I'm disassembling it to take it to the customer. Because once we finish all the stuff in here and we have that first coat of finish on it, then we can start building out our interior with our slats and all that, which is basically just going to be screwed directly into our side rail. It should be a pretty quick and easy process to put all of that together. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this video. I do hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.